Ellen Friedman, welcome to Unbroken.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Alexandra.
I'm so happy to have you here. So, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got interested in the three principles?
Mm. I'm always amused where that story begins every time, right? So, well, I was happily minding my own business, enjoying my career as a physical therapist when the knock on the door to coach came in 2011. And I was like, really? But I love what I do. I thought you had to be miserable to do something else. And then I started feeling miserable by not following that. Really,
Mm.
I got in my car one day after seeing a patient, and I was like almost lethargic. And I said, "Okay, I heard you. I'm coming back." So I began coaching in 2011, and then in 2013, in a coach training program. Um, One of the instructors introduced a video on the inside out understanding of stress. And at that time, it was a really old video. And I remember the feeling inside of me. I can like remember the chair I was sitting in. I
Mm.
remember the feeling. And then I also remember my personal mind going, oh, but we've got techniques and tools and things to do with people. So, yeah.
And moving forward from there, was it difficult to get your head around the idea of no tools and techniques?
Um, I'm not sure because what was more difficult was trying to intellectually figure out what this understanding was. So
Mm.
I spent a long time reasoning with what I was learning, comparing it to what I had already known, seeing where it fit in, seeing where things didn't fit in. And at that time, at that time, there were so many free opportunities to learn. I mean, there are today, but there were so many opportunities, and I could participate in almost all of them.
Mm.
And there were also many, wonderful paid opportunities and workshops and trainings, and and you didn't have to choose because there weren't the abundance that there is today.
Right, right. Yeah, such a good point. So this was around 2011, 2012?
2013 was when I first heard that,
Okay.
and then it kind of stayed on the back burner until 2016.
Mm-mm.
But Alexandra, I am so clear that it doesn't matter how many years you've been looking in this direction or exploring the principles, because we all see what we see when we see it, and right. And don't you love it with when clients just see something that don't see? I mean, it's so fun.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, insight doesn't really have a timeline, does it? I mean, it can happen, yeah, anytime. So you mentioned being a physiotherapist. So you had an interest in healing, helping people like going back. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where that
Mm.
began, if you know?
Where the interest in physical therapy helped
Well, yeah, and
or
healing
started.
and yeah,
Mm.
those kinds of things.
I I didn't have an exposure to physical therapy, like personally or for a family member. So I don't remember exactly how I landed on it, other than healthcare seemed kind of interesting, but nursing didn't, and going to medical school, I had no drawn to. So the allied health professions sounded fun and interesting, and I had a couple opportunities to work as a um, aide, and and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I went to physical therapy school, And different circumstances in school led me down the path of wanting to work with people who had chronic neurologic or new neurologic conditions. So that was
Mm,
a specialty for me right out the gate. And what I really loved about that is you kind of had to look at the whole person. You
mhm,
know, when someone has an injured back or an injured wrist or an injured knee or had surgery, it can be very easy to be focused on the body part or the joint. But looking back, I was interested in the whole person. And I remember, like, right out of physical therapy school, I had two patients. Both of them had very similar strokes. Their MRIs looked similar, and they had completely different outcomes. And I was so fascinated by that.
mm. Oh, that is really interesting. Wow. That is so cool. So transitioning then, and I noticed on your blog, you have a post about rest and its
Mm.
importance. And I think our culture is so not wired that way. You know, it's rest is almost a four-letter word.
I love that.
Yeah. So can you talk about rest and its importance and why you recommend it to your clients?
Mm. I recommend it because it works, right?
Mm,
Wow, there's so many different things that come to mind now. So I literally was witnessed miracles or what looked like miracles in the people that I was working with who had multiple sclerosis, ALS, stroke, brain injury. I worked with a lot of people with who survived traumatic brain injury, and when their nervous system was downregulated, they did better. They had less pain. They had more mobility. And so it just began to make sense to explore that with people and let them figure out what what worked for them. So I worked with a lot of people with MS because I actually trained in a hospital where every patient in the hospital had multiple sclerosis. It was wild that that even existed. And this was before there were any medications to help people with their symptoms. And so I would notice that almost every one of my patients would be busy doing everything they could before they hit the wall of fatigue. And then they'd say things like, that's all I can do for the day, or I'm okay till noon, or I'm okay till 2 o'clock. And I won't get into the details of the story, but I'm happy to share it with anyone who inquires. Um, a patient suddenly went from requiring a rest at 4 hours after she woke up to 8 hours.
mm,
Now, like, increasing endurance from 4 to 8 hours seemed impossible. People were people were taking medications to try and do that, and that wasn't happening while helping. And so I noticed that and what a big part of her treatment program was relaxation exercises and what I call down regulating the nervous system. And so rest is the simplest form, well, maybe not one of the simple forms of down regulating the nervous system. I think taking a long deep exhale is also a very simple way, and learning to rest before full exhaustion is so important for all of us, neurologic condition or not, right?
hmm. Yeah, exactly. And do you meet resistance when you suggest this now to clients?
Mm. Well, I'm just going to explore your question a little bit more because I don't really think that I suggest it to people. I explore with them what happens when they do? What happens when they don't? I share
Nice.
stories, and then they kind of come up with, well, maybe I could try that.
Nice.
Because as a physical therapist, I did recall having resistance. No, I can't. I have to get everything done before noon because I'm not good after that. And this other client, she was like, "Oh, I'm good till 1 now. Oh, I'm good till a couple weeks later. Oh, I'm good till 2 o'clock. Oh, I'm good till 3 o'clock." She goes, "Oh, I'll never have energy after 4." And I said, "Really? Even after what's happened?" "Oh, I can't. Because if I have energy after 4 o'clock, then I have to make dinner, and I don't ever want to make dinner for the rest of my life." And
Yeah.
I said, "I can't help you with that. I can't help you have energy after 4 if that's what it means to you. But
Yeah.
maybe it could mean something else." That's what I said.
Mm.
Maybe it could mean something else. So the suggestion would come in the form of stories and explorations and experiments. I love the idea of experimenting because you can't get it wrong in an experiment.
Yeah. Say more about that, about what that looks like.
Just yeah, I was gonna say trying something, but it's not trying something. It could look like, well, just experiment with resting and not sleeping, or just experiment with tuning into your body and, like, what would it look like to go to the gas station and fill your car before the red light's going, you know, put more fuel in me. So if you fill up a gas tank in a car when it's half full or half empty, whichever you see it, then it takes less time to fill up the tank.
Mm.
And so when you rest or down regulate the nervous system, and there's so many different ways to do that, it takes less time.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, that's
And we can
beautiful.
even experiment in a session with, you know, I have a lot of people that used to measure their fatigue, and I'm like, let's measure energy instead.
Mm. So in other words, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is how tired I am. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most energy you've ever had, how much energy do you have?
Mm. Yeah. And I'm going to ask this question from a very
Sure.
personal place. Um, what do you see as some of the causes or some of the primary causes of fatigue? Like you're
Mm.
obviously dealing with people with physical issues, but do you see is fatigue
Well, but
created
not
by
always, not
okay.
always, not
Yeah.
always. I mean, there's lots of things that create fatigue,
Mhm.
and trying to figure them out is no longer necessary for me, for
Mm.
myself or for my clients. In fact, I'm on the other side of 3 autoimmune conditions, one of them being chronic fatigue syndrome.
Mm.
And in the past, I would see fatigue as an indicator, as a marker of illness or disease, or a reminder that I have something. And it doesn't even enter my mind anymore to be anything other than an indicator of my body saying, please give me a little bit of rest.
Mm. So that's really fascinating to me, the chronic fatigue. And so that was something that you experienced
Mhm.
yourself. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey and what you saw?
Well, I was masterful at avoiding discomfort. And so I have to be honest, I never really shared with any of my practitioners that I had it, because there was nothing you could do. It came at the time, many, many, many years ago, it came with a lot of ideas around mental health and emotional health. But then I had a client, I was working with a client that had chronic fatigue and Lyme disease, and she started telling me some of her chronic fatigue symptoms, and I was like, oh, I can't, you know, waking up with this sore throat, waking up more tired than when you went to bed. Like I was like, oh, I guess that I do have chronic fatigue. I thought it was just chronic stress.
Mm.
Um, so back to your question again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just interested in your experience of chronic fatigue,
Yeah.
and how you might see it now with your
Mm,
understanding of the principles.
yeah. Well, I have to say it's really hard to tap into. I mean, it's really hard to tap into how I felt because it was for such a long time, and I don't, I can't even say like it started here and ended
Mm,
here. But the understanding that I have now is whether it's chronic fatigue syndrome or any fatigue, I think the mental busyness is a huge component to it.
mm,
And as I say that, I'm aware that I also at one time in my life had a very fairly rigid meditation practice. And I wouldn't say that I was feeling any better. My fatigue symptoms were not better when I was meditating. They're probably better now that I'm living into a meditative life rather than having a daily sit practice. Um, and so, and I think there's so many mental, emotional, and physical contributions to fatigue. Um, Food, environmental toxins, but mental busyness, mental stress is a huge contributor for all disease and illness processes, huge contributor.
hmm. Wow, yeah. And I find that so fascinating because one thing I know about myself is how busy my mind has been, and it's gradually slowing down over the years, now that I understand the role that thought plays in our lives. And I still find myself quite fatigued. I describe myself as having no stamina. I have very little stamina. And I know that that comes from a busy mind. I mean, that just seems to be what's been the constant in my life. So I want to ask you, if you had a client who recognized that their busy mind was affecting their levels of energy. It's kind of hard to say, but how would you approach that with them?
Mhm. I don't know. There's so many different ways, but let's talk,
Yeah.
since you brought it up, let's talk about you. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Sure.
I mean, so I know this identification with poor stamina, low activity tolerance. I've had it, I had that script running for a long time and not too long ago. And one day I was somewhere and I did something that I haven't done. Like I hiked 6 miles. I haven't hiked 6 miles in years. And I felt so good doing it. And I was like, oh, I guess I don't have poor stamina. I guess I don't have poor endurance. I just thought I did.
Mm,
And so just experiment with like what would you like to do more of and do
mhm,
it and do
mhm,
it. And I remember the days when I would like, okay, I can do this much of a walk or I can exercise for, and I just see how masterful my personal mind, my ego was trying to control and manage my life rather than let's just walk out the door and what if we just know when we turn around?
mm.
And what if
Right.
we push too hard and then we have to take a longer than normal rest? So for my PT days, I do remember that telling people, excuse me, if you need more than a 10-minute rest when you get back, then you've probably gone a little too much. So what? So you rest
Mm,
a little bit more.
mhm.
Um, but the background noise of poor stamina, low energy is can be louder than we think.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and it's interesting to see that uh attachment to my identity of that idea of not having a lot of stamina or energy. And, I can almost see myself telling myself that story. Yeah, for
So the
sure.
experiment would be like, what do you love to do?
Hmm.
Where do you love to walk or move? A couple months ago, we were at a friend's house and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "It's a water rower." And I said, "A water rower? I've never heard of a water rower." And it's a rowing machine that uses water as resistance.
Mm,
I love the sound of water, no matter
yeah,
how it comes,
me too.
waterfall, ocean, streams. And so my husband's like, I can't believe that how committed you are to the rower every day. And I'm not, the commitment doesn't come from here. It comes from, I love being on the rower and I love feeling my entire body working.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that amazing? Yeah, yeah. I love that. And yeah, as we're touching on this, it sort of occurs to me as well that it feels like it's all on me to manage my energy and kind of parse it out in the ways that seem, so that I don't run out of gas. Yeah, it's fascinating, all the things that
Okay,
are going on.
I've got a great story for that. I'm sorry that I interrupted you. Was there anything else that you wanted to
No,
share?
that's it. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Before I go to the story of whose energy is it, the other thing, back to just fatigue in general, there's so many contributing factors, and I investigated all of them
Mm.
heavily, especially food and where this food was sourced and whether, all sorts of stuff around food. And what did that do? It just added more mental pressure, more mental energy to it, right? And
Right.
so sometimes now, so now when I have any kind of symptoms that I just think, oh, I've got pressure on the system.
Hmm.
I just got pressure on the system. What is the system, what does my body want right now? Does it want some breathing? Does it want to sit down and relax back in a chair or lay down, or what does it want? And that comes.
Mm. Nice. Oh, I love that. And then you said you had a story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So um I was blessed with the opportunity to speak at the London conference in 2019. And the conference was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. My talk was Monday at 1 p.m. And Saturday night, I was committed to officiating a wedding on the East Coast of the United States. And Ellen can do it all. What was I going to say? What was I going to say no to?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, I'm closer on the East Coast than I am on the Southwest of the U.S. Um, so I landed, so officiated the wedding. The next day, got on a plane to Heathrow, landed at the airport, and as we're landing, I'm thinking, how many hours sleep did I get? Because I was like working hard to sleep on the plane. And I couldn't calculate if I had total of 2 hours.
Mm.
And I remember feeling this, oh my gosh, 2 hours of sleep. How are you gonna do this? And I heard and felt, you are not the source of your energy.
Wow. Wow. That is so cool.
And I had so much fun at that talk. The whole day was great, and the whole night. I didn't have any jet lag. I didn't have any, pressure on the system. I didn't have any fatigue. And I loved how I showed up for
Oh,
myself and for the people that were present.
yeah.
And that has really stayed with me for everything. Like, we're not the source.
Mm,
Source is the source.
right. Yes. Yes. Oh, wow. That's so
So
great.
what happened to you when you heard that? I'm just curious because I felt a shift within you.
Yeah, I think it's just so easy for me to fall into it's all on me and whatever it is, right? So it can be manifesting something, or it can be in a relationship, it's all on me. Um, Figuring everything out, same thing. So I need to keep hearing this message over and over and over again that it's
Is
not
that
all on
true?
us.
But is even that true that you need to hear it over and over and over again?
Well, I guess every time it clicks with me again, it feels good. It feels like a new, deeper
Yes.
awareness
Okay.
that it's not all on me.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. And the other thing that has helped me and the clients that I work with along that journey is not only is it not all on me, but I'm always going to have some variation of thinking that it's all on me. Because, and that's what I love most. That's what one of the things I really love about this understanding is like the understanding has helped me to really deepen in my acceptance of the human condition and of me as a human. And that even though I know something, and even if it's not just an intellectual knowing, but a knowing that I'm not the source of my energy, there's still going to be personal mind, ego tendencies to forget it or to want to grasp a hold of control, because I see that the personal mind, my personal mind, is masterful for me, knowing how to maintain the illusion of safety, security, and control.
Mm,
And some insight many years back had me see the perfection and the mastery of my ego doing that. And since then, I've had so much humor when I see it. It's like, oh, you again. Oh, you're trying to pull me into thinking that you're the source of my energy.
mm.
What a clever way you do that.
Right.
And I was never lighthearted with my relationship with myself before. Like, I was serious.
Yeah. It was serious work.
It was
Yeah.
serious work.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Something you said there made me want to go a bit deeper. It was
Sure.
around, oh, I've lost it now.
The
Oh, well.
human condition, accepting
Yeah,
my
maybe it'll come back. Probably it will. We'll see. So on your website, you have a mention of healing beyond dis-ease. Can you tell us what that is and what that looks like to you?
Hmm. Well, first of all, just the word dis-ease, I've come to know as lack of ease, right? So when I feel a lack of ease in any part of my life, it's a little tap on the shoulder to move into ease, to move into the, instead of swimming across the current or upstream, to 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 flow downstream with ease. Um, And I've been blessed to witness so many people have chronic ill, and I want to say it this way. I've been blessed to have so many witness so many people um, have deep emotional, spiritual, mental healings, deep forgiveness for themselves and others, in spite of their physical illness not shifting. Because
Mm,
again, for me, just like source is the source of energy, source is also the source of physical healing.
mm, right. So it's, in other words, it's not all on them for the healing,
Yeah.
right? Huh. Yeah. I feel like I feel personally challenged by living in ease.
Mm,
And I guess that's partly habit and maybe partly ego, like you just, reflected on. My ego wants to be in control. It wants to
sure.
manage everything. Yeah.
But if
So,
that's the way it works,
mm,
it no longer makes sense for me to try and make it do anything different other than to recognize and become aware that it's masterful for me and
mm,
your ego is masterful for you.
mm, right. And so holding that lightly, like you talked about a minute ago.
Mhm. Yeah. I think the other thing that can be really helpful is no matter what it is like, what is it that you really want?
Mm,
Like, okay, so I hear, you don't want the low stamina, the low energy, the fatigue, but what is it that you do want?
mm,
And how would you feel if you had that?
mm.
And 90 some percent of the time, it's the same thing. I mean, not with different people, I'm saying, like, take 100 people or a thousand people that I've worked with now. It's all some variation of peace or being in a state of loving. And so coming close, if that is there something like, is that true for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there another word for you or for your clients that you think that people are really seeking?
I think peace is the one that resonates
Yeah.
the most with me personally. Yeah.
And I did the doing on almost anything that was possible to find peace.
Mm,
I literally prayed on my hands and knees before I believed in anything to pray toward.
mm,
I meditated for peace 360 some days a year.
mm,
I medicated for peace. I learned lots of skills and tools and techniques to try and calm down. I'm laughing because it just makes no sense to try and calm down my humanness.
right.
Um, and and I think one thing that all that effort did was show me how committed I was to it. And
Mm,
so when I'm moving away from that peaceful feeling, I'm just more sensitive to it now. Like it was the habit. I was always back here in some variation of chaos or stress or tension. But now I'm like sensitive to the moving toward or away from it, and I can catch myself. So instead of in the past, it would have been like, what do I do to not be in this tension place? Not possible. But having this sensitivity that I'm moving more toward in the direction of peace or away from peace has been really a helpful guide.
Mm.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, well, I want to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah,
So
of course.
for our listeners, you talked about all the things you were doing to try to achieve peace. And so I was going to say, what do you do differently now?
Yeah.
What is different now about,
Yeah.
what's the
Well,
alternative to that?
mhm.
And you talked about
So
that a little bit,
yeah, but yes.
that
So
sensitivity.
So I wanna be aware that I wanna share that although it sounds like I'm not happy with the things I did in the past, they all made sense at the time, they looked like good ideas, they were helpful for sure, but I didn't know what was possible. And I would say I still don't know what's possible. I think that the experience of living in peace is ever expansive, that I'll really, really never know the edges of that.
Mm,
And so now I don't have to fix or change or do anything when there's tension other than to just like I feel like tension is just kind of like a divine tap on the shoulder waking me up, you know? And I might choose to stay in the tense place for a moment, but I know it won't go. I know it won't stay. I know it's temporary. So if it serves me in that moment to stay there, so be it. Um, and I would say this leads me into this other thing this other area that's really shifted for me is I've become more and more aware of how somehow I mastered feeling what I wanted to feel, when I wanted to feel it, and how I wanted to feel it. So I was very controlling about my feeling experience of life.
mm,
And I thought that because I could feel and because I could cry and because I could get angry that I felt all the feelings, but I really wasn't, not to the level am now. And so I've become so attuned or sensitive to the feelings, to all to my feeling state. So I think of like my anxiety that I was medicated for. On the continuum of anxiety now, I could literally sometimes feel just a very brief shift in my breath where it's more shallow. And I'm like, oh, that anxiety train is driving by. I don't have to get on it. Like the wake up is that I don't have to get on it.
mhm.
And at the other extreme, maybe there's some heart palpitations. But like maybe that's when I wake up to there's anxiety stirring or just or pressure and uneasiness. Like there's just this continuum and I just love that I've become so sensitive to it that I just don't spend a lot of time outside of a peaceful state. And we never really went into this like quiet mind, quiet body, but the body, peaceful mind, peaceful body really makes a difference. And I know that's what has helped me reverse 3 autoimmune conditions and other things that are currently healing in my body.
Mm. Oh, lovely. And I want to point out for listeners too that what you're pointing to is that the feeling that
Mhm,
comes always lets us know
mhm,
um, the truth of what we're thinking. It's always there giving us feedback.
mhm.
So that tension that you described, you use that word, um, is not bad or wrong or something to be, managed or fixed. It's simply a message
Yeah, an
that it,
indicator.
an indicator. letting you know.
I love the metaphor of a barometer because what
Yes.
barometers measure pressure, right?
Yeah.
So pressure on the system, sometimes I feel it with a shift of a breath, and sometimes I feel it with a shift in my heart rate. It doesn't matter. I before the understanding that I have now, it would have been like, what do I do to avoid the more severe ones?
Mm,
I'm laughing because it didn't work.
right.
And now it's like, oh, I caught it when it was here, and sometimes I catch it when it's here, and that's just the way it works.
Yes. Yeah, and I love that barometer metaphor. It's such a good one. And if we, when we think about it, if we spent a lot of time looking at the barometer that's on the wall and saying, well, a movement of the needle within this zone is okay, but if you go outside that, I won't be okay. None of that is true either.
Mm,
So,
I love that expansion too. It's not true.
yeah, yeah.
Mm, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I love hearing that for you, this being able to rest in peace has helped you with these autoimmune conditions. That's so extraordinary. And so often with guests on the show too, and I love hearing this, we've tried so many things. So, and again, innocently, like you pointed out, and those looked like the right thing to do at the time. But noticing the difference between knowing that we are peace versus searching for it
Mm.
is so powerful.
And for me, there was also a period of time that the knowing that I was peace was way more intellectual than the experience of I am peace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh man, I was really, really caught up. Oh, I know peace because I was comparing it to the massive anxiety that I used to have, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that and as I said before, like I don't know the boundaries, the depths of what peace is available, but I know I have a knowing that it's way more than I could ever imagine.
Mm. Yeah. Nice. Lovely. So we're coming toward the end of our time together. I want to ask you to tell us about your project around Mavis Karn's book. It's that simple. Mavis has been on the show, and for the listeners, I'll link to Mavis's episode in the show notes. So tell
Please
us,
do.
yeah, tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, please do because I've been I've had so many amazing mentors, but something happened with with Mavis and this book. So she wrote a book called It's That Simple, a user's manual for human beings. I'm looking to see if it's right here on my desk.
I know I'm
And
looking for mine as well.
um and I read it's a series of 15 letters. And I read one, two, and three, and I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I've got to talk to Mavis about this. This must be a program. So something said, don't email her because it could be a short conversation. So let's have a conversation with her. So I set up a time to talk to her and I said, Mavis, I woke up at 3 a.m. and this book needs to be a program. And she said, well, what does that look like? So we talked about it. She asked me if I would do it with her. And then a few minutes later, she said, oh, just an hour ago, someone asked me the same thing. I think the two of you should go off and do it together. So, so I ran 5 programs, two with her virtual assistant Azul, who was lovely, and we did such a great. We really had. It was our first time working together, and we just jumped into doing it. And so we had small groups where we invited people to have the book or not. It wasn't a book club. And each session, I would read a letter, and we would explore we would have a shared experience of what that what people heard, where it made sense, where it didn't make sense, where the exceptions were. And I just want to say stay tuned to how it's going to come out in the world again, because I'm on a new venture to put it out where it's more accessible to people any time of day or night, and not just by enrolling in a program. So we'll see how that unfolds. It feels like a big well, I could make a good idea that it's a big project, let's put it that way. But when I remember this feeling that said, there's something else that you can do with this, and it's easy.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, touching back in with that feeling. That's great. So, is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Hmm. I love that you asked me that, because just now I heard, I want people to know that I'm also really committed to educating and informing people on end of life options.
Mm,
And each state and each country has different laws and rules, but there are some end of life options that are universal, can happen that you can do anywhere. And I think knowing what you want at end of life and sharing that with people is so important, because in my healthcare working days, I saw so many families struggle over thinking that they knew what their loved when their loved one couldn't speak anymore or share what they wanted, that they knew. And we might know now, we can always change our mind, but as I'm really committed to educating as many people as I can on that. And I love that conversation as well.
wow. Oh, that's so fascinating. I love that too. And yeah, that's a subject that's dear to my heart as well, just based on personal experiences um and yeah, various other things. So I love hearing you say that.
Well,
Thank you for
maybe we'll have
sharing that.
another conversation about that.
Maybe we will. That would be great. Well, Ellen, this has been awesome. Why don't you let everyone know where they can find out more about you and your work?
So I'm always open to an email, ellen@healinghousecalls.com. My website is Healing House Calls. And I also have a healthcare-coaching.com website where I support healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, and others to know that stress and burnout is optional, even in the workplace, even in that workplace.
Nice. Okay. I will put links in the show notes to those
Thank
things.
you. Thank you so much for a fun a fun, and more than fun, meaningful, deeply meaningful conversation. And I'm always open to inviting people into a conversation. I say, I don't try on a pair of jeans without buying, I don't buy a pair of jeans without trying them on. So I'm not gonna, I don't want to hire someone or think about working with someone before I try them on.
Nice. Oh, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Ellen. Take care.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.